women aren't lacking capability. That's not why they're not in manufacturing.
You can operate and manage a Target store. You better believe you can be successful in this environment.
30% of women after their maternity leave won't return back to work if they don't feel like the policies are there to support them.
It feels so isolating, right? In some of those moments, and to know that you're not alone, you have that sense of community, both personally and professionally, I think makes a huge difference. Hi and welcome. I'm Becca O'Toole, your host for today's episode of Talent Talk. I am very excited to have a conversation with Kayla Homar, who is the Senior HR Business Partner at West Pharmaceutical Services. And Kayla, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Becca. So my name is Kayla Homar. First and foremost, I'm a mom of 2 young boys, which means my days in life is full of a lot of energy, curiosity, and a whole lot of coffee. But I started in the HR leadership space in 2018. I've done a variety of industries, starting with appliances, transitioning to automotive. I also did a little stint in renewable energy and now landing in the pharmaceutical space. I've been lucky enough to work with smaller organizations that are ran by family companies and family dynamic, and be where I'm at right now, which we have a facility of over 600 people. So I'm just really excited to talk today, Becca. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I am super excited for this conversation as a woman in not only the HR space, but in the manufacturing space, right? I think we have a very unique vantage point on a lot of the policies and procedures and just ways of working. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation where we're going to focus a lot of what we talk about around women in this space, right? In this traditionally male-dominated environment. And really, really excited to share some of the work that you've done to really push the boundary for women as an advocate, but also in your own experience as a woman in this manufacturing environment. So first, I would love for you to share a little bit about policy, right? So policy is one of those super sexy topics that we as HR professionals get to dive right into. But talk to me about policy as it relates to flexibility, parental leave, right? As caregivers, oftentimes policies are so rigid, right, that it's a barrier for women or caregivers entering or staying in the manufacturing workspace. So tell me a little bit about how you think about that and, you know, some of the examples that maybe you've experienced within your own professional background.
Yeah, that's such a loaded question, Becca, but I think it's really great because women, when we are entering the workforce, especially in manufacturing, women aren't lacking capability. That's not why they're not in manufacturing. But what you very easily teed up is manufacturing is traditionally a male-dominated space. And that traditional worker with those policies and caregiving is done so in the mindset that this traditional worker doesn't have those caregiving responsibilities. And so when women are hitting these major life stages, such as having kids and raising families, unfortunately, some of these more rigid policies are forcing women to choose between having a career or being a caregiver. In fact, research actually shows that about 30% of women after their maternity leave won't return back to work if they don't feel like the policies are there to support them. And that's a huge number, right? The fact that that's even a statistic is crazy to me. And since becoming a mom, knowing that work and school are not on the same page. Since when do you hear of schools getting out at 5:30 p.m.? Am I right? Like who is getting out on time to go get their kids? It's not happening. So it's about really organizations looking at how we're going to redesign these systems that we can start putting in place with these caregivers in mind. And so West has done this in a variety of different ways. We have part-time jobs that are available now for anybody. They just have to go through the work with their managers and work through what that looks like logistically for their role. We also rolled out, instead of 2 weeks of parental leave, we have 4 weeks of paid parental leave in addition to what they're already entitled to. And that's gender neutral. And so I think that's a huge one, because when we start leaning into leave being normal for parental leave for men, we start normalizing caregiving. It's not just for women. And then also understanding where we can lean in with telecommuting.
I love that. And I think, as a first-time parent, oftentimes you don't look at a company's benefit package as, what kind of post-delivery support will I have, right? You don't even know what to look for. You don't know what you don't know, right? And that's, I think, the case in parenting in general, right? You just kind of stumble into what's next and you navigate that challenge, which ultimately, I think, makes us much stronger employees, right? We know how to navigate and be dynamic in a million different ways. But I think I would love for you to share a little bit about your specific experience, because I know as a first-time mom, there was a choice, right? Do I go back to work? Is this the right environment for me to be successful and to meet kind of my goals as a mother, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm so happy you brought this up because parental leave and maternity and just the decision is going to be unique for every woman. With our dynamic, my husband had decided to start a new venture and he was going to be an entrepreneur and start his new thing. So it didn't work well for our family dynamic after having my first son to really not go to work. I didn't have much of a choice when it came to financials. And I think when we peel back, do women have a choice to come to work or not? Or are they being a caregiver? Sometimes that choice really doesn't exist. And so that was really real for us. And so coming back to work, regardless of it being a choice or not, it didn't make it any easier. So when I came back, I had a very interesting time after having my first son. I was coming off of my maternity leave with one company and starting with a new one. So that adds a layer of complexity. I'm the new kid on the block. I came in a time, and I think it was 2022, where there was a formula shortage. So there's this huge debate within moms, right? Are we breastfeeding? Are you choosing to breastfeed, or are you formula feeding? At the time, it didn't really feel like I had a choice. It was, am I fighting somebody in the store for the last can of formula, or am I going through the challenges, right? It's not easy to pump and do that at work. So when I came to this organization, we didn't have a safe space for me to do that. That was warm and inviting. And so it was one of the things that I'm really proud to share, that when I came here, it wasn't just selfishly for me, Becca, but it was for every mom before me that had to maybe pump in her car or the bathroom, and every mom after me that I can now come to and say, we have not just a room for you, but we have a space that you're going to be empowered by, that we're going to make sure that you feel loved on, and we're going to put snacks in there. We're going to have bottle brushes for you. And it's something that we really led by example. Now, all 14 of our North America sites have a room like that. And it's just something that organizations should look inward and say, do we have this? Because you're unintentionally maybe communicating and excluding a group of women who are ready to come back, but maybe don't feel that support.
That's amazing. It honestly gives me chills, because that is a huge barrier, right? And I think, especially as a woman, in that environment already, you might be feeling a little uncertain, right? And then to add that on top, right, can feel just jarring, right? And hesitant to ask and to kind of advocate for yourself. So the fact that they don't have to at all those 14 sites now is huge. I'm curious, with that change, have you noticed any kind of retention benefits? Have you noticed moms coming back and staying where maybe previously you've experienced a drop in that?
Yeah. So I think with our facility, without knowing how many before in the tenure that I've been here right now, it's definitely a data point that we can start looking into. But what I have noticed is the community around that room. So we have a board in there. Every mom that's able to feed her child through that room while they're working signs their name and their baby's name. And it's just a way for us to say, I see you and the hard work that you're doing, whether it's in that room or it's out on the floor when I see you, because it's not easy. There's a lot of things that go into play with that. And if we come back to a supportive environment and a support, like there's a group there that supports you. It's one thing to say, here's an initiative, but how are we following through on that? Like, we have this initiative and there's this room. We're not done. The work's not done there. We're following up with them. Postpartum is a real thing and people don't check in. So we're checking in with mental health services. We're checking in to say, Do you need anything? Because there's so many statistics that exist out there that if you continue to breastfeed your child, all the health benefits that there is, not just for baby, but also for mom. And so we're checking in consistently. We have a group, our Women's Initiative Network, that are sending them letters. Hey, you've reached 1 month breastfeeding, coming back to work. You've reached 3 months breastfeeding. Like, you're doing a great job. You've already done the great stuff. So just seeing that and having those connection points within the facility just helps really reinforce that it wasn't just a one-time initiative. It's something that we're here to continue to embrace.
I think that's great. I love those little notes of encouragement, because I think it feels so isolating, right? In some of those moments, and to know that you're not alone, you have that sense of community, both personally and professionally, I think makes a huge difference, right? That sense of belonging. I am curious, not every organization has a Kayla who's willing to spearhead an initiative around nursing rooms. From an operational standpoint, what is maybe one quick win or one change that organizations can make, operational changes that a company could make to be a little bit more inclusive for not necessarily just working mothers, but caregivers at large?
Yeah. So when we think about women, we put ourselves in this box that we are the only caregivers. And so I'm happy you expanded that there is most of the time equal parts caregivers, right? We have dads and we have moms, and everyone is in charge of these children that we have. But when we look in manufacturing, most of the time, Becca, those schedules are very rigid. There's a high level of predictability. You know the schedule that you're working because it's scheduled around the manufacturing demand. There are highly unpredictable aspects of that, however, right? Especially when you're working with customers. Supply chain models can switch up really quickly. Demands can fluctuate. So last minute coverages, last minute overtime needs, as well as swapping shifts with team members, those still very much exist in day to day with manufacturing. And moments like that will cause a lot of stress for employees, especially those with caregiving responsibilities. Imagine knowing that you're getting off at 3:00, now being told, hey, we have mandatory overtime for another 4 hours. Who's picking up your child, right? That's things that we aren't always thinking about. So organizations really, to connect those dots, Becca, can lean into their HR professionals and come through. What policies do you guys have around overtime? Do we have clear protocols for the coverage, or are we just grabbing the first person that we see, right? And what are we communicating to the team members to make sure that they understand that we're trying to be proactive in those areas of uncertainty and kind of last minute demands? At the end of the day, this can make a really big difference, right? It's just time, without compromising operations, right? So we're still saying that the work can get done and you can sign up for these extra overtime hours. We're just saying, let's tell people a little bit further in advance, or can we build in this overtime because that's a trend? Inclusion doesn't always have to be big programs.
Tell me a little bit about your perspective on overtime. I think this is kind of a hot button issue, and at least from my background and experience in the manufacturing space, it feels like mandatory overtime is just a regular part of the business strategy. As we're looking at expanding our workforce and in creating more inclusivity and more inroads to manufacturing, do you see any changes to that mandatory overtime schedule, if you will, right? A lot of times it's just what I've seen, it's baked into your schedule. Are we tweaking things? Are we changing things? Things like part-time schedules. How are those impacting the way we work and what schedules we offer to create more inclusion?
Yeah. So every organization has to figure out what's right for them. And traditionally, if somebody's working a Monday through Friday and you're constantly in your organization scheduling overtime on Saturdays and Sundays, I would challenge operations to take a really hard look at what their what their scope of their work is looking like. Maybe it's time for a bigger change. Maybe you need to do shift work, right? And so we operate on a 2-2-3 where we do have baked in overtime. So we're not mandating a whole lot of overtime. So yes, the shifts can be a little bit more wonky and it's not your traditional first, second, third shift, right? But our team members know this is the week and this is the day that I'm going to work an extra 8 hours of overtime baked into my schedule. And again, leaning back to what I talked about earlier, if we can lean into more predictability and eliminate any of that very quick, unnecessary stressors and changes, we're just going to make sure, not just for caregivers, but just for people's general good health, right? I know I don't want somebody to tell me as I'm about ready to walk out the door that I need to stay at work for another 4 hours, right? So if we organizations just understand, do we need to actually deconstruct this and figure out what works best? If this is a constant for you, then they need to make that hard decision.
Absolutely. I think we've talked a lot about what makes a woman stay in a manufacturing organization or in their career. Tell me a little bit about why or what kind of things you guys have done to kind of create more women jumping into the manufacturing landscape.
Yeah. So this one is great because when you talk about how are women coming into manufacturing, you have to first think about why are they applying to our organization,
Okay.
Right? And so that looks externally. So how are we going to get Becca to apply? The first thing that you're going to see for us is going to be our company website. You're going to go there, you're going to play around. You're maybe going to see our socials, some of our external like recruiting materials. If you don't see yourself in those, you're not going to apply. So predominantly on those materials, it was one type of group, males. Right? So we're unintentionally excluding females and other underrepresented groups. We need to have in those materials on your company webpage, on your career page, on the flyers that you're passing out at job fairs, we needed to have different racial and ethnic groups on there. We needed to have females, and not just in traditional roles. We needed to have them in the leadership role. In the picture, the one standing up in the conference room, directing the group, because that communicates to the people wanting to come into your organization. There is a space here for you. And that's what we've had to do. When I first started, some of the materials that I've seen historically archived were exactly that. It was very one level of people. And now if you look at what we have, somebody can find themselves in our material. And that's what invites people in.
What do you think is most appealing about careers in manufacturing today?
For women, I don't think women wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to be in manufacturing. I don't think that happens. I think they fall into manufacturing because there's a lot of great opportunities there. And there's more than we think areas for them to grow and expand into. And so with that, I think women, as they're considering what's out there, they could be in an area that's retail and they're running the retail store and they've not thought about operations or manufacturing a day in their life. But I promise you, there's something that other people have done in different roles that can translate into manufacturing. And manufacturing is where the money's at, right? So I'm telling my girlfriends who are, head of a Target store, what you do on a day-to-day basis translates into what my operations managers are doing. You could do this and we could pay you double for it. Like you've never.
Pretty appealing.
Yeah. So I think women maybe more so unintentionally fall into manufacturing. Maybe as they're looking out there for different roles, right? Like HR, I didn't wake up and say, I'm going to do HR in manufacturing. I was like, I like people and I want to be there for people. And it just happened to work. And I think that's how people fall into it. But once we get rid of that stigma that we've kind of been talking about, manufacturing is that rough, oil-ridden job where you're running machines, we can kind of break open the doors of the different opportunities out there for people.
I think that's such an important part. And we know, my background being in the talent acquisition space is that, females traditionally do not apply to roles at the same pace and clip that male counterparts do. Oftentimes because they don't feel like they've met 100% of the qualifications in the job. Now, can you imagine a world where, we have a Kayla who's willing to translate your previous experience into an operations landscape? because I think that is a barrier we will continue to see until we can create some common language around what these roles really are and kind of remove that curtain, right? That dark, dirty, dangerous misnomer that we have for manufacturing, and really say, hey, if you can operate and manage a Target store, you better believe you can be successful in this environment, and imagine what different opportunities you're going to have.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point too, Becca. When we were working with some of our veteran partners and what veteran rank and how that translates into corporate rank. And one of the things that kind of came up about that is how many different times is it about who's in the room evaluating that resume versus what's on that resume. And so for women, I remember specifically being in a meeting where we interviewed a strong candidate, and I didn't look up the resume before. And afterwards, the hiring manager said, well, she was out of work for about 7 years. And she put that on here. And I said, she was a stay-at-home mom. Can I tell you what that means? She was running a household, right? And making sure those right people are in the room to translate that, because you don't know what you don't know. And so to have somebody to say, like, let me help articulate that. I'm not saying she was the right candidate, but let's make sure we're not spreading a false narrative of what she was doing.
Yes. I mean, you always need a Kayla in the room, right? Because that is the person that's going to be able to decode and create those pathways and connections. I talk with a lot of HR leaders, and we always bring up transferable skills. I think we struggle a lot to really identify exactly what that means. And manufacturing is an animal all of its own, right? Those skills are very different in a lot of ways, but they stem from other much broader, much more common skills, right? And then just building on that. So, being a part of the team here at Cengage, we're an education organization. I am curious from the seat that you had, what partnerships? So thinking of like schools, trade schools, community-based organizations, or nationally based organizations. What kind of partnerships do you leverage to increase your talent pipeline, maybe specifically for females or caregivers, or just really expanding your talent reach?
Yeah, so I get to double dip a little bit with this one. So in North Carolina, which is where my site's at, that I have the pleasure of working at, I connected with a group called Move, and Move Boots to Biotech works directly with having service members who are transitioning out, placing them in biomedical engineering fields, which is where we fall into. And so why I say we get to double dip with that is our location is within a stone throw of an Air Force base and an Army base. And so those individuals coming out in itself is a very large, as you know, in TA, underrepresented group, and just that communication and what they did in the forces versus how that translated into corporate life. So we're really excited about that. We've already yielded 2 candidates from that have turned into full-time hires for us. But additionally, they don't just work with those service members. They're working with the spouses of those service members. Most of the time in military families, if you're getting up and rooting your life, that spouse and family is coming with you. And that wife or husband is potentially struggling to find a new area in which they get to identify as their own, career path again, right? So spouse gets to move up and go, and they have a job. And Move is that nice little in between that says, I know you're not a service member, but you're a service member spouse and you mean just as much to us. And most of the time we are seeing females come through that as the women. And I can't tell you who is more resilient than women who every 5 years are picking up, right? Rewording their house, logistic nightmare, right? I want her on our supply chain team. Get her in here.
I love it. I mean, that's an amazing organization. I'm not familiar with it, so I'm definitely going to go check that out. Do you know if they're national or are they strictly based kind of in North Carolina?
Yeah. So Move serves as a very unique niche market where they are doing the work to bring those candidates right to our door. They're just in North Carolina, but connecting with your military installations. If you have an organization that's within 45 minutes of them, I would strongly encourage anyone who's listening to it in talent acquisition or in HR, you need to be on the SkillBridge program. Being able to utilize that, connecting those dots for your organization to capitalize on that talent, it's a no-brainer for us, and it should be for other organizations. If you don't know much about it, do your research. There's plenty of knowledge out there, but it was the first time I had heard about it. And I was like, who is gatekeeping this secret from me? Like, this is something we should be teaching in college. Come on now.
Yeah, it's an amazing, amazing program. I can attest SkillBridge has really been able to help transition military personnel into industry for many, many years. So lots of great things to say about that program. Well, Kayla, we have come to our time, but this was such a wonderful conversation. And I know people are going to be interested to learn a little bit more about your background. And I would encourage them to check out your LinkedIn because you're constantly posting different updates and stories, great perspective on how you approach your work. So I would recommend that anyone interested in connecting with Kayla, check her out on LinkedIn. And once again, I really appreciate the time and the wonderful conversation. I think we're both deeply passionate about this intersection of work here. So thank you, Kayla.
Thanks, Becca. This is great. I appreciate you.
Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on the next episode of Talent Talk.